What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? At a Clamots wedding. They were young, maybe like 22, 23. There is apparently a caking tradition in some parts of the country where when they cut the wedding cake, the couple feed each other a bit and smear each other's faces with cake as a joke. The bride had absolutely made 1000% clear to the groom she did not want to be caked. He did it anyways, and not just a small smear, but full on smush the slice in her face. She was stunned initially, then got up, face full of cake, yelled "You asshole, I told you not to do that," and then ran to a back area in the reception. The groom tried to follow, but the bridesmaid/mother of the bride stopped him. So he sat at the head table awkwardly, while half the wedding party rushed off with the bride. She stayed back there for like an hour. They eventually did let him back there to check on her. We could hear her crying and them arguing. The rest of the reception came to a screeching halt until one of the bride's aunts emerged and directed the servers to clear the tables and put on some music. They got divorced 2 years later. My dad's mother and stepfather owned a bar restaurant back in the 60s that hosted the occasional wedding reception. At one such reception, the husband caked the wife, even as she was asking him not to, knowing he would do it. When he did, a fist fight broke out between the newlyweds that soon involved much of the wedding. As far as I know, they were married for a long time after. The groom gave a speech thanking everyone for coming that devolved in the space of about 2 minutes into a straight up roast of his new brother-in-law. They were friends, and the brother-in-law seemed to take it in good humor, but there's only so much implication of "I'm for sure going to be ducking your sister tonight" that you can take before it becomes really cringy. It didn't help that I barely knew anyone there because I was a +1, and B, I was on the table with the elderly relatives from that side of the family who were less than amused. Oh god, you just gave me a flashback to my wedding. My brother-in-law is super awkward and doesn't understand emotional boundaries. He likes to inject himself into other people's emotional moments to sing always a Ben Folds song or whatever. Takes videos of people so he can edit a cheesy video together later as a gift, that kind of thing. My husband and I had a small wedding and agreed to no maid of honor or best man because it was a pretty non-traditional event. So after we said our vows, we joined the crowd for a toast from our officiant, which was fantastic. Until after the toast, guess who pushed his way up to the front, pulls out a huge notebook, and then proceeds to roast my new husband with weird jokes that no one got, and even my husband had forgotten about, or didn't know what he was talking about for the most part. Luckily my sisters encouraged him down, and then got up to give an impromptu joint speech inviting everyone to the buffet. The worst part is he made my new father-in-law record it and sent the speech to us afterwards as a gift. I don't think we saved that video. Bride shows up almost 2 hours late to her own wedding. Southern California, in an open field, no water, no shade. She shows up and wants to get married in her yoga outfit. The groom shut it down. And when she refused to change her clothes, the groom decided to leave her looking stupid, and they never got married. Edit. I spoke with my uncle, and it turns out he had speculation that his fiancée was sleeping with her personal trainer. When she showed up in her yoga outfit, it was all he needed to call off the wedding. She ended up married to her personal trainer and divorced again. Good call on the groom's part. At the reception line, after the church wedding ceremony, the bride had a large bottle of her favorite perfume and sprayed each guest with it, female and male, whether they wanted it or not, as they entered the banquet hall. Some guests complained that the smell of perfume was so strong that they lost their appetite and couldn't partake of the banquet. Why would she do this? They sang their vows to each other. Neither had a singing voice. Vows were generally batshit crazy, like submissive in the bedroom and not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus, and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. Everclear, my friend. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breath to not laugh and get through it. My cousin did this. He played the guitar while singing his vows. He doesn't know how to play the guitar or sing. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people and like less than 100 show up. A guy knew a couple who didn't specifically invite anyone, just made like a public event on FB or somehow warned people would know when/where it was and show up. They were confused and offended when almost nobody came. I wasn't a guest, I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. This might be the most depressing one yet. Not the groom and bride's fault, but the pastor marrying them talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like, but he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way, and his other daughter's first words were this and that he and his wife make love throughout the house, because that's what you do when in love, etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his sex life and his kids. Oh god, you just reminded me of an acquaintance I knew. Didn't go to the wedding, but heard from a mutual friend who was there, where the pastor marrying them told the couple to divorce their friends under the promise that it would make them a stronger couple or some shiz like that. And they followed that advice. So pretty much after the wedding and reception, they just never again talked to any of the friends they had invited to celebrate their big moment. I thought they would be divorced within a year, but turns out that they are still together. But yeah, apparently married couples aren't allowed to have friends. They bought an apple orchard after leaving the city to live a simpler life, and really doubled down on the apple theme. Apples everywhere, on the tables, in baskets all around the venue, on the podium, where they got married, pictures of apples hanging everywhere, small fake trees with apples tossed under them. The dude marrying them had an apple tie on, apples somehow incorporated into every dish for the reception. The cake was shaped like an apple. It was really ducking bizarre. They sold the orchard a couple years later, because they had no idea what they were doing. When I was reading the first few apple themed things, I was like, oh, that's cute. But then the list kept going. Mayo. When I was in high school, one of my hockey teammates had a kid with his girlfriend when they were juniors. They decided to get married, and the wedding was officiated by my teammate's dad, who also happened to be our head coach. The entire wedding was the bride and groom's direct family and the hockey team at a Golden Corral. Then the reception was at the same Golden Corral. Then we had a hockey game that night. The other team we played that night somehow found out about it and hounded the guy the whole time. They were a bunch of ricks. Now about 7 years later that have a second kid. Dad is an officer in the Air Force. Both of his kids play hockey and he coaches and refs, and him and his wife look very happy, so I'm glad it all worked out for them. Edit. For all of you asking about the game, I honestly don't remember if we won. Hockey season's a long one with a lot of games, and it was 7 to 8 years ago. And as a side note, I really did not mean for this to be a rip on the couple. They're amazing together and doing an awesome job raising their kids in a loving household where they want for nothing. They haven't had the easiest lives, but they're doing the best they can and absolutely killing it. I haven't spoken to him in a while, but I've seen his dad, our old coach, at alumni games, and they're such an awesome family. They're the perfect example of the fact that you don't need a giant, expensive, fancier wedding to be happy. As long as you have each other, family, and friends, it's a joyous occasion that should be celebrated. I know of no place in the world less suited for a wedding than a Golden Corral. This is the best story. I've worked over 200 weddings at the same venue. Many couples wanted fireworks, and we had a company that could always do a show. The couple always, without fail, would pick Firework by Katy Perry to play during the show. I had an 8th grade student die of cancer, and they played this at her funeral. That's all I can think about when I hear the song. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under two legal identities. I've known a few couples who've changed their name to something distinct, i.e., neither partner's original last name, but they meant it as a symbol of their relationship, not a way of hiding from a credit rating. Oh, I have to. 1. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song, so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song, and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone, legit 400 people, and the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony, and when the bride put her shoes back on, she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet, and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. Tell me the Carrie Underwood song was Before He Cheats. That's a great wedding song. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. Well, aside from the 2 hours late part, that could be cool. My cousin and his wife are super religious and maybe the 2 most awkward people I've ever met. They did one of those fake out first dances, where it starts with a slow song then transitions to a dance number with an upbeat song. Not only is that naturally cringe-worthy, the upbeat song was 5 minutes long, and they just kept repeating the same moves over and over for what felt like eternity. There was no alcohol allowed at the wedding, so there was nothing to dull the pain. That reminds me of my cousin's wedding. The pastor made the ceremony into more of a Sunday sermon than a wedding ceremony. Then when they finally got to "I now pronounce you man and wife" instead of kissing the bride, groom, parents and 3 or 4 random people suddenly stood up, held hands on a circle, and had a silent prayer for several minutes, while everyone was confused about what was happening. Also, it was a dry reception. I saw one guy with a beer, but he must have brought it himself, because I looked around and couldn't find any. Edit. I forgot to add that they did eventually kiss. They were turning to walk out to the reception and the pastor suddenly realized they never kissed, so he had them kiss. Flew away in a helicopter at the end, but there were only appetizers for food. I worked at a wedding once, and the groom decided the day before he wanted to arrive by helicopter, told the wedding planner to sort it out. I felt sorry for her. Gets to 3 PM, when the guests are supposed to be there for obviously everyone isn't, and there's barely anyone there. They fly in like James ducking Bond, land in the rear garden, put the back of this huge country manor, get out all smug, then realize there's no one there. So they then have to fly away again, hide behind a tree, and wait for an hour for everyone to arrive to repeatedly the process. Who was that helicopter ride really for? When I was 11, my cousin got married for the 3rd time. I never really liked her because A, she was 37 when I was 11. We didn't have a lot in common, and B, she was pretty full of herself. The wedding itself was fine, pretty boring but fine. Then we get to the reception. We were told we had to sit down as soon as we got there. Some people found it weird, but I've only been to one other wedding before this. Her other marriages were when I was little. No kids were allowed at her weddings, so I didn't think anything of it. The bride and groom then make a huge dramatic entrance, and everyone awkwardly clapped for them as they strutted around the room with actual crowns on their heads. The bride then gets the microphone and hands it to her mom and asks her to say something she loves about the bride. She then tells her mom to power it on and says she wants everyone in the room to say one thing they absolutely love about the bride. Not the bride and groom, not their relationship, just the bride herself. It was super awkward. Edit. This blew up a lot more than I thought it would. Also, for everyone asking what did you say and where is she now, I said your Aisha is pretty, because I felt so awkward and wanted to die. My older brother said pa, which made her force a fake laugh and urged him to say something. He ignored it and she kept insisting, so he said your parents, and parred the mic on. She and husband 3 divorced a few months later because he was caught cheating with an 18-year-old still in high school. He gave off bad pedo vibes to the point where even strangers noticed and wanted kids to stay away from him. She married another guy a few years later, and they are still together. Bonus, she likes to take pictures with a life-size cutout of Trump and post it on Facebook because she, her mom, and sister believe it looks so real. Nope. And she even pretends she's being caught cheating on husband with cutout, posting pictures of her kissing it or it in her room with a caption like "oops, caught with my side piece" or some cringe like that. Husband is also a hard Trump supporter, so he laughs about it, but her daughter, from marriage too, deleted her from Facebook and often stays with her dad because she can't stand her mom anymore. Her humility. My own wedding, so me. My brother and our wedding band surprised us with a beautiful rendition of a very romantic song by a guy called Juan Luis Gura. Just so happened to be me and the Miss Us favorite song ever. Lots of happy crying, and one of the best memories from that day. Unfortunately, my Miel doesn't like to be one-upped, so she impromptu got a distant second cousin from her side of the family who we did not know to immediately sing My Heart Will Go On from Titanic. He was not a good singer and used a Chiz T YouTube karaoke track, and it led to very awkward slow dancing, followed by fuming from her after we cut it short. Terrible feedback from trying to play the track on the mic from phone speaker. Just completely deflated the beautiful moment from my brother singing. At least I'm happy to say we are still going strong and have been married for 10 years now. It should go without saying that little poop nugget of singing was not included in our wedding video. Edit. Wow, this really blew up. My biggest comment in Reddit yet. To those who asked, this is the song. YouTube. Terrible feedback from trying to play the track on the mic from phone speaker Mayo. Imagine not refusing to go sing in this situation. Mil must have threatened second cousin with something good. The crazy bitch bride entrance no one knew about. Edit. NSFW. Kinda thought the words crazy bitch in the link would clarify that, but in case you need more warning, here it is. In love with the shock and confusion on that dad's face in the front. Not the bride and groom, but the bride's father. I was the best man. They married young, after she fell pregnant. It wasn't planned, but they clearly loved each other, and it was the right thing for them to do in their eyes, both Christian. Anyway, come the wedding day I'm sat next to the bride's father at the reception and I can see he's looking at his prepared speech repeatedly. I can see phrases like not ideal, would preferred not to welcome you into the family in these circumstances, etc. Just before the groom gets up to give a speech, the bride's father excuses himself to nip to the loo, leaving his speech behind. I'm not ashamed to say I swiped it and then pleaded ignorance when he returned. In the end he stood up and muttered a few words about love and then sat down. I never told the groom and I'm happy to say they're still happily married 20 years later. Update. Blimey, that blew up. I never expected this to be noticed, but thank you for all the very kind comments and awards. Dude, you are the best man. That's the type of thing a legendary best man does. Your friend made a good choice. You were totally there for them on their big day. The groomsmen prepared a skit in which they lost the groom at the reception and proceeded with over-the-top hands on hips. Hey guys, aren't we forgetting something? Well, where can he possibly be? Acting like some high school musical. None of the guests were prepared and silently fussed around with their drinks and silverware. When the whole thing ended, they anticipated like a standing ovation, but it went over the heads of everyone. A lone voice muttered that was kinda weird as they made their exit quietly. Edit. I guess this blew up to the point I should try to remember some of the skit. It was some of the corniest chiz I saw. Not sure if some of them were inside jokes to the groomsmen crew. They all entered into the main area together minus the groom. One guy had the fat-ass cartoony voice. Here and we missing something? It can't be me, because Imal were eyes prepared. Winks and pause for laughs. What about your boaty? Oh no. Produces tie, puts it on, waits for audience reaction. No wait. It's the groom. Where can he possibly be? This went on for a bit. I don't remember it all because I was on my phone not really doing anything but to avoid eye contact every time they said a line and desperately scanned across the audience. In the end the groom came out through the door when he was cued. I don't think he knew about the skit. Thank God he wasn't there to see it unfold. As for the crowd, who isn't gonna clap and whistle when the newlyweds show up at a wedding, so it was all good. I love the comedic timing of that. Was kinda weird as they're walking out, because you know they were gonna hit the hallways like bro we ducking mailed it. Friend of friends. Young, uber Christian small town naive girl. Meets married, much older man with 2 kids. Falls in love. He does eventually leave his wife. Doesn't want any custody. Wedding was her hometown church. His vows were over the top about how he has never felt love before. She is the only woman he ever wanted to marry. He's been so lonely his whole life, etc. He's literally sobbing through it all. Her turn to say her vows and she's standing there saying nothing for at least 3 beats. Then she is handed a microphone and the piano starts playing. She's made up her own song which are her vows. After the ceremony we adjourn to the church basement for the alcohol-free reception. I'm somehow roped into serving the groom's cake. It's 2 Nesca car cakes made with an edible photo draped over the cake shapes and impossible to cut through without mangling the cake, so I have to peel it off. My friend is cutting the bride's cake and it's a full inch or more of fondant on top of plain cake. No frosting. The buffet was potluck from her family. Food you'd expect at a kid's party. Pink punch was the only thing to drink. No dancing because of her religion. Then they left for their honeymoon at the town's only hotel which was like a Motel 6 leveled up in a 2-horse drawn carriage. I wasn't prepared for how terrible this wedding sounded. Instead of throwing rice, or confetti, or sprinkles, or anything like that, the bride and groom asked their friends to save all their empty jewel pods and throw those as they walked down the aisle. The friends obliged. Edit. I posted a screenshot of a friend's Snapchat from the wedding on r/trashy a while ago. Please chuck garbage at us as we leave the church sure sets a tone for the marriage. This was Marizo, the bride's family. One of my first clamates to get married. We were 19. Had a small reception. Mostly family and friends from high school. Nothing wrong with that. They decided to auction off the garter belt, and whoever won took it off the bride. Most of us were poor college students, so the only people bidding were her dad and uncles. It was super uncomfortable. Edit. I did not expect this reaction. So to answer the most common questions, the bride's very drunk. Dad won to the tune of $500 plus. Money grabbed by the couple to help with honeymoon expenses. This was not Alabama, North Dakota, and this was not the normal garter tradition by any means. Just a particularly cringe-worthy version of an already cringy tradition. Gross. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before, so I thought, okay, maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like, no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. Was this that stupid genie joke? I went to a meeting at my workplace once where the very awkward dude leading the meeting made this joke in a conference with hundreds of women attending, and it did not go well. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service the minister's cell phone rang. He answered. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. Conversation lasted a couple minutes. Then the ceremony continued. Did everyone laugh, or was it meant to be serious? I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. I really hope when he told them all what he was doing he signed off by saying may the best man win. Deleted. My man is on them no longer being married at this point. My wife and I don't dance, so we hadn't danced together before our wedding dance. Loved it, but it was cringe-worthy. We did 10 dance lessons which helped, but it was still cringe. I was at a wedding when I was 8, and instead of the bride and groom getting up to make their speech thanking everyone, they had done like an awards show. So the DJ opened up an envelope, announced their names, they were handed an awards statue, a Barbie and Ken doll, and proceeded to thank everyone in the form of an awards speech. In the right hands, it would have been funny, but the bride and groom are incredibly shy by nature, so it was just awkward. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember this. That sounds oddly cute, actually, but definitely cringe-worthy. I went to a wedding once where they did a potluck. I guess it okay depending on the type of wedding, but the reception was at a fairly nice venue. The wedding couple was like an hour and a half late, and their best man didn't have a speech ready, so it went on for a very painful 15 to 25 minutes, also stating in there that they are going to have great sex now that they are married. This was a devout Christian wedding with many of the friends, including me, who were from church. By the time me at like table 15 got to eat, I was lucky if I got something that was kept warm in a crock pot, but everything else was room temperature. We were able to go home between the ceremony and the reception, but I bet most food had been sitting in people's cars since that morning. Oh, also the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say, okay, that's enough. The whole thing was weird. Oh, also the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say, okay, that's enough. I'm picturing him spraying them with a water bottle. Bride entered to Bravo-hit soundtrack blasting on boombox. Civil service that lasted a few minutes starting at around 1 PM. She leaves to same blasting Bravo-hit soundtrack. The mother announces that the reception starts at 5:30 PM. There is no food and no bar, but trays of dessert bars will be served. We are also told the venue is locked until then, so there is no place to wait. My girlfriend and I leave with a crowd of people to across the street to an Irish pub for drinks. A bit of a party breaks out there. We all get told to knock it off and come wait back at the venue in the hall. So we sit in the hall on the carpet for a few hours without drinks or dinner. Bride and groom arrive and enter the venue to an honor guard of floor hockey players wearing hockey jerseys and holding sticks above their heads like swords at a royal wedding. More Bravo-hit music, of course. Place emptied out pretty quick as people either left to go back to the pub or to the fast food place a bit further away. Our dinner was lemon squares and a can of Coke from a vending machine in the lobby. Funny stuff. Edit. I should mention that I got guilt tripped into staying after the event to help clean up as I lived nearby and didn't have to work that day. It was the perfect ending. Who told you to leave the pub? And why on earth did you have to wait for hours? It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee, seriously, at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton Eye Joe, and my stepsister having her reception at an honest to God truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. Please elaborate on the truck stop reception. Friend's wedding. The bride wanted to sing him a song, so she did a kind of karaoke thing. There's bad singing, and then there's whatever the hell this was. It was so awkward. Also, Jude asked a professional photographer friend of ours to photograph the wedding about a year before. Got a super non-committal answer. Never followed up, and was shocked that the photographer didn't show up after he specifically declined the invitation because he was going to be in another country. Had the entire set of groomsmen rent / ridiculously expensive tuxedos. Which, fine. Cool. Happy to be here. He's having his tux custom tailored, asks for something ridiculous and gaudy, but when quoted the price says he can't swing that, and insists they do it for about 1/4 the price. They do their best to meet specifications within the given price range, but it's bad. Really bad. So, the groomsmen look amazing, and he looks like a clown that didn't put on his makeup. Has another friend make a custom batch of mead for the toast, but rents a hall that doesn't allow outside alcohol, so it can't be used for the toast during the reception. It was probably the cringiest thing I've ever seen, not just the cringiest wedding, or even cringiest / thing at a wedding. Oh, I want pics of this tux. Lol. The minister, or pastor, used to date the bride, and gushed about how wonderful she was. Told the groom, if he ever died not to worry, he'd take care of her. I was shell-shocked. I so wished I could think of a reason to ask the couple for a copy of the video of their wedding, but couldn't quite find a legit one. OMG, why would they choose this officiant? I DJ'd a wedding for a couple that were constantly throwing up red flags as to why I shouldn't DJ their wedding, i.e. asking for a discount in exchange for a positive review. I don't want your ducking fake review. One of these red flags was when they wanted me to live mix their special dance number. I'm fine with mixing live. It is what I do professionally, but these two were not professional dancers. Honestly at this point I can't even remember what their complaint was. They did their dance. It wasn't entirely smooth, but their family and friends loved it because, get this, their family and friends love the bride and groom. Immediately after the reception the groom gave me a tip and they both said I did an amazing job. Cut to the next morning, likely while the bride and groom were still drunk, the groom emails me with some constructive criticism. A few emails later he is demanding that I apologize and that he isn't going to pay me the balance of what I was owed. He then ghosts me. A few days later the wedding coordinator contacts me to say that I have to give them a discount because they are so mad at how their first dance went. These two people, who are not professional dancers, who awkwardly pulled off a terrible first dance with nobody who was present knowing how the dance was supposed to look, blamed me for feeling awkward. I just told the coordinator that the bride and groom can keep their money. You took the high road, man. I wolf took him to court, but that takes a lot of time. Probably my cousin's wedding. The food was really bad. And I mean really bad. Things that were supposed to be warm/hot were ice cold and completely undercooked. There was music but nobody was allowed to dance because we don't want people to dance on our wedding. There was also no alcohol, not a single drop. But the worst thing was the seating arrangement. They didn't plan on families/friends sitting together. I don't know what they were thinking. I was sitting on a table with complete strangers. They even separated our grandparents from each other. After an hour my grandmother stood up, walked over to my grandfather and both declared that they are leaving now to the restaurant down the road, having something good to eat and a beer. I joined them as well as my parents. It didn't took long that people noticed that our seats were empty. Really easy to figure out, since nobody was allowed to dance or walk around in general. We got a call from one of my uncles where we are at. After we explained why we left he said, "You are right. This is bullshit," and we ended up with 20 guests from the wedding in that small restaurant, having a fun evening. I still don't know why they even bothered celebrating their wedding. They also never invited us again. That's actually a good thing, because now I don't need to find an excuse why I can't join their future parties. I actually read in a wedding advice book that you should seat people with strangers so they get to know new people and the two families get to know each other. I think it's a bad idea. Okay, so as soon as the bride and groom got out of church everyone went to congratulate them and give gifts, which usually are flowers/alcohol plus envelopes. The bride had a pen and notebook and she signed each envelope, or wrote in notebook, if someone didn't give her envelope. Later as we went to the restaurant, where the party was about to start we waited for 2 hours for the pair. Turns out they made a stop during their ride to count money. As they finally got to the party they started complaining that they didn't make enough to pay for the party expenses and earn more. They only spent time only with the rich part of family. The poor tables didn't get the good cake/food. There was literally different food on some tables. I sat near our poor part of family. No meat or cakes made it to the table. Me and like 7 other people didn't get forks, only spoons. Why would you give fork to someone when there's only soup for them to eat, right? Now, mind you, I gave them enough to pay for like 5 plates/people and I helped them during preparations. I even baked a few cakes that I didn't get to eat in the end. Half of people got out after like 20 minutes. Bride called them all terrible for ruining her dream wedding. Worst wedding ever, and that is just a part of the whole wedding mess. I wish I had a car back then, so I could go back home as well, as the wedding was terrible for many other reasons as well. Groom was cheap, bride was a Karen. What country was this in? It sounds bizarre as duck. It happened at my wedding, and I still look back and shake my head. 1. The pastor who we pushed to marry us found out that we had sex before marriage. He made sure to point that out during the ceremony. 2. When saying the vows I wrote I got so damn emotional it all sounded like gibberish, and when I turned to get the ring from my best man he was bawling his eyes out and couldn't find it. I can't imagine how PPL in the audience felt. When saying the vows I wrote I got so damn emotional it all sounded like gibberish, and when I turned to get the ring from my best man he was bawling his eyes out and couldn't find it. I can't imagine how PPL in the audience felt. I don't know, this sounds kind of wholesome and cute. I live in Britain, and as a child there was a show on CBBC, children's BBC, just like this. The show was called Marrying Mum and Dad. Oh lord, I hate that show. It's about these kids who get to arrange their parents' wedding. They choose the theme, the entertainment, and the cake. Naturally, the kids were always making absolutely horrible occasions, because what did you expect? They would choose a ridiculous theme for the wedding: Australia, medieval, space, clowns, and have everyone arrive dresses appropriately. Then they make the couple do some activity or another. It ranges from bungee jumping to VR, for entertainment. Then they have the wedding, and eat the cake. The worst part is that the parents have no clue what's happening. They don't know anything until the day, and the children will go out of their way to make them uncomfortable, making them eat bugs for entertainment. Everyone just has to go along with it, and you can tell all the guests are really awkward, and then at the end the couple have to say just how good their Australia themed wedding where they ate bugs was. I miss the terrible show, where the kids got to redecorate the house and just fill it with slides. Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about two lovers in 1800s. In front of like 300 people. Sorry, engagement ceremony? What's that? Dress up as Belle and the Prince from Beauty and the Beast. The wedding was also held at a Renaissance fair during Pirate Weekend. The marriage lasted 6 months, but at least I got to dress up as a pirate and go home with a bridesmaid dressed as a fairy. That sounds dope. NGL. Deleted. I laughed so hard at this visual. In November 2018, I attended the wedding of my in-laws' friends. They were an older couple, in their 60s, that had been dating for decades and finally decided to tie the knot. The husband did a stint in the Navy, and so given the timing of their wedding, he invited a lot of his veteran buddies from across the different branches. During the reception speech, the guy had the DJ begin playing the military hymns for the various branches, and he asked all the various veterans from said branches to stand up and be recognized. I get where he came from, wanting to pay respect given calendar proximity to Veterans Day, but absolutely nobody, veterans included, knew he was planning to do that. They all kind of stared amongst themselves and awkwardly stood up. The civilian guests just fidgeted for the 5 minutes or so this went on. His heart was in the right place, but damn if it wasn't cringy as duck. Later that night, the bride got really drunk with her girlfriends and spent a while dancing barefoot on the floor. At some point, she took a wrong turn and wound up rolling her ankle pretty badly. She ended up in one of those mobility boots for about a month. My sister's wedding was similar. She and her husband met by being top athletes in a sport, and she had gone on to another sport. My dad started his speech talking about the time the groom borrowed his farm truck and accidentally put a dent in it, but dad refused to allow groom to fix, then spent the next stages recalling all of sister's races, the race conditions and times. He then started going around the room calling out all the other athletes in both sports, their biggest achievements, and having them stand up and be applauded. It was cringefest. My uncle had to interrupt after several attempts of winded up looks, and we got dessert. Straight after, dad grabbed the mic and started up again, but everyone just laughed, and he had the mic forcibly removed from his hand lol. My cousin's wedding featured the groom driving a small tractor around the outdoor venue, while the bride rode on the back, to the tune of She Thinks My Tractor Sexy on repeat for about 30 minutes after their vows. The guests just hung out and waited, thinking it would be a quick jaunt, and then we could enjoy some refreshments and food. Nope, like half an hour, to make sure they got good pictures and video, then even more time for pictures sitting stationary on the tractor. It was blazing hot with no canopy or cover, and I was very pregnant, so I was especially miserable. He is not even a farmer, they live in an apartment. Edit, OMG, this blew up. Wow, to think my top ever comment was about my cousin's bizarre wedding. I do want to add that I like my cousin, he is nice, just kinda clueless. His wife is the same, and they are perfect for each other. They are still together and now have many children, none of whom are named John or Deere. Are you from PA by chance? My mom and Mel insisted on doing a stagge, a bit of theatre often, to mock the bride and groom by showing embarrassing pictures from their childhood. Cringeworthy all by itself, but we explicitly asked them not to, and they went against our wishes. So when they performed their stagge everyone was annoyed and embarrassed. When we finally made it through that ordeal, we wanted THD party to resume, but my mill did another sturge, and we were about ready to kill her. Yes, the sturge, the most feared part of any wedding or gathering. Very rarely is it actually funny or entertaining, most of the time just so goddamn annoying. We were Mario and Peach for our wedding. Please tell me there was a groomsman dressed as Bowser. Deleted. I think I went to this wedding right after the officiant asked if anyone objects to speak now or hold your peace. Did a dog start crazily barking? Yeah. They also gave many bottles of Boozer's table gifts and the mog took all of them. It was something else. Edit. I have no idea why the poster deleted. His/her original post said that the groom handwrote long intimate sappy vows that he read from, and then after his monologue the bride giggled and said ditto. To be fair, that is not exactly how it went down at the wedding I went to, but pretty dang close. He/she then replied to the above post I made by saying that there was a kiddo who ate confetti thinking it was food and threw up everywhere. As far as I know that did not happen at the wedding I went to. I'm so sorry everyone, but there is no internet meeting Kismet today. At least not for me and the now redacted poster. I'm a little worried that there are at least 2 relationships in the world where the groom was seemingly way more invested than the bride. I prefer cute cringe over sad. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh, but we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. It's a cult. Dating is only allowed to find a marriage partner and was very monitored to ensure no premarital touching occurred. Worst wedding was a small ceremony. It was literally her family, his family and my family in her grandma's living room. What made it the worst was the XXX kiss at the end. The groom wanted the bride inside his mouth hardcore. There was tongue in and out everywhere, saliva and hot breathing, complete with first date excited groping. Nobody knew where to look for 5 minutes. JWs have the worst weddings and funerals. Honestly, I dread attending them. My husband left the cult about 10 years before I met him, but he still has lots of JW family, of course. Surprisingly, they haven't cut him off, probably because some of them rely on him financially. Sorry to blab on, it's a major thorn in my life. I was forced to sit there and had to watch the bride and groom take pictures in poses that were from Bollywood movies for 2 hours straight. Honestly though, with Indian weddings typically being an event spanning 3 or 4 days, with some ceremonies taking 4 hours or more, 2 hours for Bollywood pics doesn't seem too bad. Also at Indian weddings the audience isn't captive. You are basically expected to get up and leave to walk around. Went to a wedding in the United States. This was both the bride and groom's 4th marriages to each other. They got married 4 times and divorced 3. They picked a dirty motorcycle bar. Not my wedding. This, okay. But were openly giving young children alcohol then laughing at them being drunk. I asked my friend if I could leave when the bride pulled a knife out of her breasts and tried to stab the groom for having sex with a woman while they were divorced. I'm not sure if this is common in New Jersey. Other weddings I attended while in the USA were not like that. That's gotta be an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? Not the couple. The pastor kept saying our heavenly father, daddy God, while marrying them. Edit. Thanks for the gold. For context, it was a military wedding. It was just the couple and a pastor. It was live streamed on Twitch, and the pastor was probably about 25. It was in Hawaii. He was wearing flip-flops and a lei made of fake flowers. That's the weirdest chiz I've ever heard. He probably thought he was so slick having a unique thingy. Giving horrible vows and speeches. A part of my family has the habit to use any family gathering as a moment to remember loved ones who died. That's not a comfortable habit for me, but to each his own. However, it becomes very weird when wedding speeches and even vows start to include great uncles who died more than a year ago, and the only people who actually knew him are my grandparents. Yes, the vows. And not even in an interesting way, but just if only Uncle Barney could have still been alive while we are getting married. To be honest, our entire family is horrible at giving speeches. There's 2 brothers, one of whom is my dad, and 2 sisters. My parents can only make joke speeches. The uncle and his family make dry lists of things they do. For example, his wedding speech for his son was an 10-minute monologue about renovating the couple's kitchen. One aunt can only boast about achievements their family members have gained. If there's no achievements, there's no speeches. The fourth is the one with the death speeches. Mind sharing some of your parents' joke speeches? I used to videotape weddings, so I've seen it all. This one couple from New Jersey were the spitting image of Snooki and JWoww's ex-husband, Roger. They were super into appearances and very over-the-top gaudy. During their church ceremony, they had their very white 60-years-old uncle, with Native American feathers tied into his hair, stand up and chant around the church giving what I can only assume was some kind of blessing. It was so weird and out of place. I assume they wanted to seem deep during their ceremony. They mixed colored sand together in a vase too. Went to a wedding for my cousin. It was both of their second time getting married, and they had only known each other for about 4 months. When they were getting married at the altar, the husband had a 6-pack of Dr. Pepper and the wife had a 6-pack of Mountain Dew. After the reading of the vows, the priest says you may now kiss the bride. So they kiss, and then immediately hand each other one of their drinks, and start to chug it. This is either just weird or a pretty wholesome private joke. So let's see. Groom changed who his best man was, and didn't tell the original BM until the start of the ceremony. Bride and groom asked a guest to bartend the reception. At the reception, groom dirty danced with his stepmom. Full hands on her. Bride and groom hold their wedding party up to do a choreographed dance to Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Lights, but didn't give them any pre-warning or teach them the dance. That song is 5 minutes long. Wedding was at a scenic boarding school campus during the summer. Guests were told dormitories were complimentary to stay in. Guests were not told there would be no bedding provided or account in the building. Groom later reviled everyone who stayed in a dorm asking for money. Same bride and groom chose another friend's wedding reception as the right setting to yell at a third pair of mutual friends for not including them in their wedding party. This was all one wedding. I'm in the wedding industry. I've been to over 3,000 weddings. The singing your vows thing is never ever going to work out like you think it will. Never sing your vows. Never attempt to sing any part of your wedding. It will not go as you visualized it. A wedding day is not a good time for surprises. Don't surprise your bride with an unexpected part of the ceremony. Don't surprise your mom by the wedding itself. True story. The bride told her mom she was going to an engagement dinner. The only exception to this rule is if you give the bride a surprise addition to her in grandma's diamond, a ring made from her parents' rings, etc. Jokes about sex later are never funny. They make people uncomfortable, and it makes you look like an adolescent. There will always be crickets after you make the joke. If you are going to be late, communicate that to everyone somehow. Have your or your parents, or someone tell everyone you will be late. The staff needs to know, especially if you forget the rings. Don't stress it. It's a funny story. If you forget your vows, wing it as best you can. Just don't sing. Ask the officiant for help for last-minute vows. Finally, don't get drunk and be an A. You don't want to be that guy. Plus, if you are drunk, you won't be able to have sex later. Crickets. You should write a book. I went to a potluck wedding. The attendees kept all the food in their hot cars, while at church then, when we moved to the event hall, they brought it all in to be served. Potato and macaroni salad, after being in a hot car for an hour. Delish. Those were the high-end dishes. Some attendees brought 2 liters of soda or bags of chips. At this same wedding they also had a dollar dance. Everyone lines up and pays for the chance to dance with the bride. They pin dollars onto her dress. They ran out of pins, so she started stuffing dollar bills into her bra. My family is from an area in PA where the dollar dance is common. Perhaps less so these days, but the money goes in a basket and you get a shot of whiskey, sometimes a cigar, and you dance with the bride just long enough to compliment and congratulate her. Also, anybody putting less than $20 in the basket would be taken out back and beaten. For some reason after the bride and groom kissed at a wedding I was at, the groom, a big douche to begin with, took a pair of hillbilly teeth out of his mouth and screamed, "I did it again, boys." I felt so sorry for the bride. IDK what she ever saw in the guy. They are now divorced. Edit. Hillbilly teeth are those fake inserts that look super nasty you get from a party or gag store. I will also clarify he was belligerent drunk, barely able to stand, and no one still to this day knows what he meant when he screamed "We did it again boys." I don't think he knew either. I hope this clears some stuff up for you all. I don't get it. Well, the groom, my uncle, didn't do it, but my dad wrote "help me" on the bottom of his shoes in big blocky letters, so when he went up and kneeled at one point the immediate crowd had a good laugh. Edit. My dad wrote the letters on my uncle's shoes, not his own. For a second I thought you married your uncle. During the wedding of some friends of my wife, the groom stopped the party to put a corny video with their photos. Since the first time they met until then, it doesn't sound that bad, but honestly it was the most ridiculous video with a totally out of place song, made worse by the fact that the bride was laughing mockingly and taking tequila shots with her friends. So this wedding took place in an Episcopal church. Priest had all his finery on and the church itself was decorated very nicely. The bride and groom had asked everyone to wear casual clothes. We all took that to mean semi-formal. Nope. They and their kids all came out wearing overalls and white t-shirts. Stood next to the priest in his formal robes. The other cringy part was when the groom, during the ceremony, started talking about the Bible verse "Let the little children come to me," and insisting it implied, "and listen to what they are telling you." Pretty sure they were divorced in 2 years. Edit. I should explain the little children comment a bit more. It was part of a 20-minute speech explaining how the bride and groom got together. There were plenty of parts in the story where the groom was like, "I wasn't sure she was right for me," but his son was pressing him because he wanted a mom. Sad story actually. Biological mom died when the kid was 4 and this was 8 years later. So it was this long and focused story that boiled down to "I'm marrying this woman so my kid can have a mom." Not a good sign when that's your main reason to get married. I focused on the little children quote because getting advice from children is absolutely not what that quote is about. I knew it, probably half the attendees knew it, and the priest definitely knew it. That whole story would have been fine to tell during the reception, but I have no idea why he decided to tell it during the actual wedding. I went to wedding where the priest raised his arms enough that his robe lifted off the floor revealing open-toed sandals. Best part of the ceremony. I went to a wedding with my ex a few years back. It was one of his fraternity brother's wedding, and apparently the bride's parents were ridiculously conservative. So conservative that they have super edited versions of every song the DJ played, including bleeping out the word "shots" from "Shots" by LMFAO. Also, it was a dry wedding, so this rendition of the song was almost too on the nose. Lol, I don't know why they think censoring popular songs at a reception is going to do any good. When my cousin got married several years back they played "Get Low" at the reception, the edited version. And of course you couldn't hear the censored lyrics over everyone on the dance floor hollering the real ones. Good lord, the exuberant joy with which a bunch of drunk white people shout "Skeet skeet Mothadaka." Large, matching back tattoos of the Monster Energy drink logo. Edit. Okay, that blew up a little. Some background. Obligatory. My brother was actually the witness, but still one of the funniest / cringiest stories ever. My bro managed a gas station about 10 years ago and hired the soon-to-be bride. A little while into her employment she requested off for her wedding. The date was still a couple months out, so no big deal. About a week before her request off she came into work and the exchange goes like this. "Bride, wanna see my new tattoo?" "Bro, sure." She lifts the back of her shirt to reveal a huge green M covering the whole upper half of her back. "Bro, holy cheese. Wow. Bride, awesome huh? We both got the same tat." "Bro, really?" "Bride, I know what you're thinking. Copyright right. But what are they gonna do? It's already on my body. It's already on my body. Haha. Bro, right. That is what I was thinking." He did get to see pictures. I'm working on getting a hold of those. It was a camouflage themed wedding. She had an open back camo gown with camo heels, complete with camo veil. I really wish it was ghillie suit headgear. The groom had camo pants with camo boots and a camo boatie. He was, indeed, shirtless. He did wear a camo ball cap though. I imagine them walking down the aisle backs glistening in the sun with Vaseline over a huge monster logo. Just the perfect day. They were happily married for 7 months. Edit. Some formatting. I suck at Reddit. Always knew Kyle and Kylie were meant to be. At my cousin's wedding, they did the thing where the groom removes the bride's garter and tosses it to all the single guys. I guess none of the guys wanted to be next to be married, because once the groom tossed the garter, no one grabbed it. It just landed on the ground a few feet in front of a crowd of motionless guys. The groom tossed the garter 3 times before one guy half-heartedly picked it off the ground. The bride wouldn't look at any of those guys for the rest of the night. It's such an outdated tradition. I've been to a wedding where something similar happened with the bouquet toss and all the ladies backed away when the bouquet was thrown. The DJ ended up making a joke about it though, and everyone had a good, slightly awkward laugh. I'm sitting here reading along happily and completely forgetting I can actually contribute. I have burned this from the far reaches of my memory. It was that bad. But here we go. Apologies for length. It was a weird long night. My wedding, if one may call it that, was an extremely small and quick affair under an overpowered by a fetid body of water, consisting of my over-emotional and violently excited mother, my ex-husband in his dress uniform, and me in a leather jacket trying to reason with the two of them that this is all rather sudden, and we are under an overpower, for God's sake. Disclaimer, the ex was the mastermind behind all this. We'd been together some years, occasionally discussed marriage. I wasn't in a rush. Apparently he was. Youth. He'd flown my mother down as a surprise, hired a local non-denominational minister, picked under the overpass for the charming view of the open water beside it. Nothing good or green lived in that water. It smelled and was stagnant. I remember staring wearily out at it while I listened to cars piling overhead. It was very windy. Did I mention it was night? This was less a joyous union and more the beginning of a Law and Order episode. My mother is doing a foxtrot in her joy over our young love. Anyways, I'm an idiot. I go with it. It's bizarre, but I've a strong tolerance for the bizarre, and I feel bad money was spent, and mother was flown and whatnot. In retrospect, I should have cast myself into the water before me and cried out for Cthulhu to take me into his sweet embrace, but hindsight is always 20/20. I digress. Here comes the minister. He's late. I can see he is also wondering why the duck we are all under an overpass in the dark. He comes closer. I get a good glimpse of his face. He is cross-eyed. Now, cross-eyed happens, and I mean no disrespect to the cross-eyed, but merciful Christ. I'm under an overpass next to a swamp. Mother dancing, ex-oblivious to why I seem disturbed. It is night. Trucks downshift above me, and now here is the minister looking at all of us at once with ease, and if I laugh, I'm never going to stop. I will shame this poor man, my idiot ex, my ducking mother. Save me, Jesus. Don't let me laugh. Dead puppies, dead puppies, dead puppies. I keep it together. I do not laugh. And then the minister begins to speak. He is addressing my ex whilst simultaneously looking at both me and the water. He wants his money up front. That's what the Craigslist had specified. I proceed to inhale my own face to keep from dying. My mother, God love her, cheerfully volunteers a 20 from her wallet. My ex is muttering and paying the minister. In the back of my mind, I wonder if this man is legally able to marry us. Sadly, he was. Minister paid. The ceremony begins. It's quickly apparent he doesn't know my name, despite introducing myself while trying to not make eye contact. He calls me Georgie. My name is Jenny. I correct him politely. He waves his hand in the air, as if swatting off flies. I'm Georgie for the rest of the event. Duck it. Why not? My ex takes my hand. My mother starts noisily weeping. The wind really kicks up, while the cars rattle overhead. I'm straining to hear the minister over the din. He swiftly spits out the "we are gathered" and so forth, with the harried air of man performing a his wedding ceremony under an overpass at night, who just wants to go the duck back to whatever Craigslist ministers do when not on duty. It is time for my vows. I actually laugh briefly at this point, but by now it's panic. What the actual duck is happening here? Have I lost my mind? I'm getting married under a ducking overpass with a officiant who can't be bothered to learn my name. It's at this moment both myself and the minister forget how the vows actually go. I remember first. I chant with this ring. The minister looks in 2 directions at once and chants in reply with this ring. All of this is confusing. I shove the ring on my ex's hand and blurt out the rest furiously. At least what I know from watching wedding movies. I'm not about to do a call and response with the minister who doesn't know my name. It's done. We are permitted to kiss. The world's briefest kiss occurs. My mother is good enough to take pictures. In the dark with the flash on, the minister looks absolute nightmare fuel. The flash is what does me in. It breaks me from whatever stupor I've been in for the last half hour. I begin to laugh. This is not the gentle sweet laughter of a new bride swept up in the rapture of love. This is the deranged howling of a mad woman bereft of her medication. This is senseless, evil cackling in the night. It fills the space under the overpass. It drowns out the cars and the wind. It does not stop. I try, I really do, to gather myself. It doesn't work. I'm too far gone. My mother doesn't look so excited anymore. And the minister pulls his eyes together long enough to give my ex a look of deep and heartfelt pity. We head to the minister's car and sign the paperwork on its hood. I'm still laughing. Nobody is saying anything. It is uncomfortable. I look and feel like a lunatic. I'm laughing out of context. This is already much longer than I'd anticipated it being, and this is probably going to get buried anyways, so I'm going to wrap it up. Minister gets in his car and leaves. I laugh. We climb into our own car and head to a chain restaurant. I laugh. We eat. I laugh. We end up at home. I laugh. Mother goes to bed. I laugh. Ex tries to get frisky. I laugh. You get the picture. Found out later he had a drinking problem and liked to pour up other women whilst drunk. He doesn't see an issue with it. Divorce ensues. Takes a while, but eventually I laugh at that too. Life is weird, but funny. This was totally amazing. They made their vows political statements. I mean, it's cool that you're passionate about your political beliefs and standings, but to put them in your vows. I went to several weddings while I lived in Korea, and in each of them many references to the unification of North and South Korea were made. This is my dad's story. He went to his friend's daughter's wedding reception. Before coming in, the bride and groom had this whole scene of them looking for each other. The guests watched it on a giant screen inside. Update, I asked my dad. It was live streamed. They then entered through opposite entrances, met in the middle, and did a little dance with their friends. They then had their first dance. Looking for each other, like a film of them just where's Waldoing each other? Bringing an umbilical cord to the ceremony. Whose umbilical cord was it? My aunt and uncle had decided to dedicate their wedding to the bride's kids. Everything was Little Mermaid, and they had a huge Little Mermaid bouncy house right in the middle of everything. Their wedding was on a severely crowded beach at 3 in the afternoon. The groom decided it would be a good idea to ride a paddleboard into the reception, and it would be an awesome idea, except everyone could see him get on the board and then go out to the ocean, then turn right around and come back. The couple also decided to get incredibly high and cold and even remember each other's names, let alone this. Oh, and one last thing. The groom's vows were literally I love you more than bacon, that's it. That's the only thing she said. Edit. Since some of you wanted a couple more stories, I will tell them. During the ceremony, as I have mentioned before, it was a very crowded beach. There were little kids and dogs everywhere. A couple of dogs got loose and no one really seemed to care, but those dogs ended up going behind them, and they started going at it. No one did anything to shoo away the pups having a good time, because obviously no one wanted to ruin the ceremony, but the only thing anyone could focus on were the dogs just going at it as the preacher was talking about love and long lasting. The couple wanted to do the cake thing, where you smash it in each other's face, and honestly it's a fun and cute idea, but they took it a little too far. The bride doesn't even pick up the cake, she grabs her husband's head and just smashes it down. All anyone had for desserts that my poor great grandma spent days making. That is all I remember for now, but if there is any that I do remember, I will definitely post them. Thank you everyone for the upvotes. The groom decided it would be a good idea to ride a paddleboard into the reception, and it would be an awesome idea, except everyone could see him get on the board and then go out to the ocean, then turn right around and come back. I can't stop laughing. Thank you for this. I've been dying for the seasonal AskReddit wedding content, and this year is gonna be a drought. My uncle not only brought up his daughter's ex-boyfriend in his speech, but talked about their toxic relationship for a solid 5 minutes. I highly recommend preparing a speech before talking in front of a room full of people. I went to a wedding where, during the speeches, the father of the bride made mention to the bride's first husband, then went on and on about how great the first husband is, and how the groom had a lot to measure up to. It was his entire speech. Not the bride and groom, but my husband's cousin has a signature wedding move. About halfway through the reception he takes over the band/DJ mic and sings this rockin' 60s pop song. I forget which one, but you'd know it. He really plays it up, belts it out. It's his moment in the spotlight and everyone loves it. Except in my husband's family there's like 60 cousins, so I've seen this move in dozens of weddings over the years. The first time it felt spontaneous and fun, but now I cringe as he heads up for the mic yet again. The whole garter thing disturbs me. Oh man. Story time. I'm a photographer and I've worked a ton of weddings, but a garter toss from 7 years ago is forever burned into my mind. So in some traditions, whoever catches the bouquet and garter have to interact in some way. Sometimes this is a dance or a game they have to play. And sometimes the guy that catches the garter has to put the garter on the woman that catches the bouquet while blindfolded. Well, at this one wedding, the guy was middle-aged and the girl that caught the bouquet was maybe 16. So rightfully a lot of people are visibly uncomfortable at the idea of this dude putting the garter on a minor. The dude himself chief among them. They blindfold the guy and the girl sits in a chair in the middle of the dance floor looking like, are we really doing this? The dude is approaching her and the DJ/MC has him wait a second. He asks the girl to get up and leave and the DJ himself sits down in the chair. Then he instructs the guy to put the garter on and he's saying it all seductively and this poor guy is so nervous about it the whole time, but you can see he can tell something is off. Finally, he takes off the blindfold and everybody has a good laugh. DJ is the MVP. But for a minute there everyone was feeling really awkward. That's my time to shine. So, my cousin was about to get married in a Protestant church that his bride used to go. Now, keep in mind my cousin doesn't have any religion, so he only married in the church BC his fiancée really insisted. So we are all gathered in the church as the minister started. His first words were good night, open your Bibles in Apocalypse. He starts reading the part that says all the kinds of people that goes to hell, turns to my cousin and says, I know you fornicated with her, she told me, and you are getting married here BC. I told her that's the only way for her to get forgiveness. And, as if that wasn't enough, the minister starts pointing out everybody in the ducking church who was fornicating. He kept saying that they were going to hell, that their lives were cursed and all kinds of chiz like this. After 1 hour and a half of this, he, without asking for vows or even saying the famous you may now kiss the bride, just said we are over here. Proceed to the party, and may God bless you all. My cousin was fuming, mad as duck. When we got to the party he starts drinking beer like an absolute madman, goes to the DJ and asks him to play the devil songs as the minister would say, and danced the ducking night away. His bride, who was on board with everything that the minister did, gets so ducking upset she started crying in the party as the minister goes home. I'm not married, and I really don't intend to be, but I don't think that's a good start for a couple. I mean, if religion is important to you, you should find a spouse who finds an equally important, otherwise everyone is gonna have a bad time. It's one of those things that you gotta be on the same page about. An acquaintance of mine from college and his bride did a choreographed dance to a song from the Disney princess movie Frozen. I think it was the one where the couple is singing to each other about love or something, but the dance was super hard to watch and it then became very obvious we were at a Frozen themed wedding. Snowflakes everywhere, light blue and silver and white color scheme. They were 22 and probably just getting married to have 6 very conservative southern kids. Edit, to correct the age. I realized they were younger than I estimated. If it's the Love is an Open Door song, then what is even funnier is that the guy singing ends up being the villain who later tries to murder both Anna and Elsa. This happened right before our wedding. We were set to have my now husband's family friend that's a pastor be our officiant. I'm not religious whatsoever, but open to anything. My husband's late mother was a Sunday school teacher, and so his family is pretty religious. Anyway, we went to the pastor's house to go over our wedding plans and everything, and he asked me if I was going to center my marriage around God. The answer was no. It got awkward real fast. It became a back and forth as to why I won't accept Jesus and how awful that is. He didn't like it either. We were getting married at a country club. He then refused to do the wedding. We scrambled and found our town's mayor to marry us. I made my own ceremony and wrote the whole thing from scratch. Then the day of the wedding the mayor mentioned her recent back surgery and just wanted to get this over with. She called my husband Eric multiple times. His name is Evan, and she was high on painkillers, so she went off script there for a bit. Have you ever watched I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry? Yeah, she did the whole marriage is a circle script. It took everything we had not to die laughing. And that pastor? He showed up and watched the whole thing go down. We got a picture with him at our wedding. Him and his wife cropped us out of it, and he made it his profile picture. Him and his wife cropped us out of it, and he made it his profile picture. Groom's last name was White, so after the pastor announced that they were married, they marched out to Billy Idol's White Wedding. I leaned over to my wife and said, do they know what that song means? I actually thought that she might have been pregnant. It was a nice moment when my wife said, I think that because his last name and now hers is White, that they thought it was cute. My Mill and her husband, Mr. Jones' first dance was to me and Mrs. Jones. I know they thought it was cute, but he cheated on her in the past, and with the song being about an affair, I just turned and looked at my now husband in complete disbelief. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.